you a woman in medicine feeling overwhelmed and disconnected from the personal fulfillment that you desire? You're in the right place. Join Doctors Joanne and Aaron as they rewrite the rules for women in medicine. Let's begin.
We are so excited for this special episode with our guest, Jeanette Lira. And I'm here, of course, with my co-host, Aaron Hurley. And Jeanette and I have been friends for a long time. We overlap in a lot of spaces. We overlap in our fields and what's important to us. And I couldn't wait to have her be one of our guests. She is a licensed professional counselor, an entrepreneur, and an identity expert. And I cannot wait to share all the goodness. And I want to say other amazing things that you are, because you're such a good friend. You're so spirited. You're such a good mom. You're always thinking of ideas. You're an action taker. You're my buddy, and you're one definitely to follow and have as an example. So we're very excited to share your expertise with our audience. And I'm gonna go straight in, and because there are so many things that we talk about in our fields of psychotherapy and psychiatry and medicine and all the things, and we talk about what's the best way to approach care and how we serve. And you talk so much about like the true collaboration. So let me ask you, what's one thing that would improve communication between mental and physical health providers right now?
Well, first, I just have to say thank you for saying all the wonderful things about me. You can always just keep going. I love it. But collaboration, I feel, is so important in care of the whole human, right? And as a mental health professional, we typically work with the primary care, the psychiatrist, and it's very hard for all of us to communicate all at once to work with one patient, because how many patients do you see on a regular basis as a doctor? Like, many. A lot, right? Yeah, y'all are seeing 50 patients a day sometimes, and we see maybe 8 clients a day, and we have them for the hour. So we spend a lot of time with them, but it's really hard to connect with the physician and say, okay, well, this is what I'm noticing. What do you notice? And help them, give them holistic care so they're able to help with thyroid, or let's say a medication isn't working and the client doesn't know how to tell the psychiatrist, oh, this isn't working for me. A lot of times on our end, we will help coach them on what to ask for, or coach them on what to ask for with their primary care, because a lot of times mental health struggles happens because of the disruption internal with our body.
Do you see help with that collaboration, or have you had some interactions with the physicians or healthcare providers, Jeanette, that have gone well that maybe we can replicate or share?
Yeah, some of them actually do go well. It's harder to get a hold of some than the others, of course, because of how many patients that they see on a regular basis. But when we're able to let the client know, like, I think it's important for us to communicate with your physician, and then we send the client to the doctor with the request to do a release of information first with the doctor. I think that works a lot faster, because then the doctor knows, hey, my patient's therapist would like to have a word with me so that we can possibly help them grow and feel better in their health. So that's what I found works a little bit better when it starts on our end and we just get the release of information. Technically, when we call, they're like, oh, well, I can't talk to you unless we have the release from the patient. So when we do that first, that tends to work better.
And I love how you empower the patient, where you're coaching them on this might be a way to bring something up to their doctor if they didn't feel empowered. I love that.
Yeah, we've had great success stories with coaching them and then them getting exactly what they need, and then they don't suffer anymore.
As a psychiatrist, I always tell my patients, the best care is a combination of thinking about it from a medical standpoint and then the psychotherapy and kind of letting them know I'm your advocate here as well. And, you know, some people have ideas of what's better. And I always say, like, no, I'll get you a little bit better. And then the rest of the work you'll have to do with the therapist. I value this work so much, and value that care also in the communication. And thank goodness I don't see that many patients a day. Like I'm
Yeah.
usually like around 10 or 14. I can't, but there are doctors who see way more, right? So then your role becomes even more important, and that you are taking the time and advocating for the patients as well. What a beautiful example.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I even train my clinicians that are coming into work at the office that it's so important to collaborate with the physician. I tell them that if your patient is on any sort of medication at all, you need to get a release of information for that physician and call them.
That's amazing.
Just together, we can make such a bigger impact if we work together.
I love that. And what I understand about you, Jeanette, is that you also work with individuals about knowing their identity. And so help me understand, how does knowing your identity as a provider impact your work and your well-being?
That's a great question, Erin. So as a human, right, we have different roles in life. We're the mother, we're the therapist, the doctor, and we have all these different roles. But when you go into your profession and you don't know who you are as a human being yet, which, I mean, in life, we lose ourselves so many times. I know I lost myself after I had my child, after I had a divorce. Like, you're rebuilding yourself every single time. And so you're also rebuilding yourself in your career. And what that means is that when you're like, I'm going to put it in therapist mode, but if you are a therapist and you have a client in front of you and you don't know who you are, it makes it really hard to connect with that patient in front of you. When you know exactly your beliefs and how to heal and like being open-minded, it really helps that client make a connection. And with that connection, they start to see different perspectives, and then they get braver, and then they grow. But I think it's really important to know who we are as humans. And then, and in our career also, who am I as a therapist? I think in school, I don't know when y'all went to school, when we went to school, they don't teach us anything about how to be a therapist. They just give us all the basic information and say, there you go, figure it out. And so a lot of times the new therapists come in and they're so overwhelmed because they just have what the book says. And that's in private practice. I mean, the book's not going to help you.
That's powerful. I believe that with women in medicine, oftentimes we are so enmeshed in some of our roles as a mother and as a physician that it's hard to extract and say, who else am I? Who was that person that used to be creative, that used to like music or dance or art or travel? And then it just gets lost for me, I know, for decades, until I started working with a coach and having them help uncover what are the areas that I was no longer identifying with because I became so enmeshed in just work and family. And it's not a very well-rounded aspect, I don't think, when we have such limited focus.
Yeah, it's easy to lose ourselves for sure. And then it affects not only our social life, but our careers.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why Erin and I even started this podcast in thinking, what's missing? What's that gap for women in medicine in particular? Because, right, like we come from our hearts, we serve, we work so hard, but yet we lose ourselves in the process sometimes. And we go back to awareness. And I love that work as well of asking, who am I? What's important to me? What are my values? What are my priorities in this season of our lives? And I've heard you talk in detail about this topic, and you do such a beautiful work and integrate all your psychotherapy skills in it as well. So thank you for that work. And our wish is that more women are connected, and men too, of course, connected with the core, their essence, and really make decisions from there. That's so neat.
Yeah, I think it's important. And then when you remember who you are, right, what you believe in, and you can be yourself, then you can take that and put it into your role as the doctor or your role as the therapist. And then that's where you're able to connect more with your patients.
I love that. And some kind of a something that can come from that. I know that part of when we're not connected, when we're not feeling balanced, when we are unsure, not clear of who we are, those are things that put us at risk for burnout as well, which is some of the things that Erin and I have talked about, that we coach on. It's so important, so common in medicine. Unfortunately, those numbers are so high. And I've heard you talk about it, right? Like it's not, a badge of honor. And I would love to hear you talk more about it. And from your perspective, what are some of the common warning signs that you see, and what can happen when people ignore it for too long?
Yeah, I kind of find as the entrepreneur is what people strive to be sometimes, because the word entrepreneur is like freedom to a lot of people. But they also believe to be an entrepreneur, you have to work harder and hustle harder. But the more we work and the more we hustle and the more we do it all by ourselves, like we believe we have to, that's where the burnout comes in. And I find that a lot of people start to feel frustrated or angry, resentful, tired. That depression kind of creeps in, but a functioning depression, because entrepreneurs, we don't have like real depression. We have functioning depression, which we keep on going so nobody knows we're depressed. But that is what burnout is. When you feel like, oh man, I don't really want to go in today. I think I want to just sit here and watch Netflix all day and just relax because I'm exhausted. That's your cue to be like, okay, something's not going well. And I know for me personally, my own personal experience, I used to go. I would see 10 clients a day, an hour a piece. And it was a lot. So much that I felt it internally in my body. And I felt like I had flu symptoms. And I didn't have the flu. I was just burned out. And so that was an eye-opening moment for me, where I was like, okay, well, what I believe is no longer working for me. And that belief was I have to work harder to make more money. And it stopped working.
I love how you cued in on your body, giving you warning signals. And I wonder what kind of signals might have been there for a while, but it wasn't until they became so severe, like the flu, where you were like, oh, my body's trying to tell me something. And how often, as you say, we're programmed, or we program ourselves to just ignore those cues and keep going when our body's saying, no, really, I need some rest. No, really, I need to take a break. And how powerful for us to pause and pay attention to those cues.
And I wanted to bring back what you said, that you used that phrase functional depression. And we had an episode a while back when we talked about mental health and how it shows up in physicians, because it's right. Like we say in medicine, like we don't read the book, because it's one of the criteria is for any mental illness is disruption in functioning, right? Like you have all the symptoms and then there's disruption in functioning. And it sounds like you're saying the same thing, that there's this resiliency that can even go against us because we can keep on going. But we know we're not feeling well. And I would love for you to expand on that, because it's something that I talk about, but would love your perspective.
Yeah. So a lot of people will come to me and I'll right away, you can tell when they're depressed when you see it over and over and over. And when you've worked with patients and depression for so long, you can call it out very quickly. But they'll tell me, I'm not depressed. I'm not sad. I'm not crying. I'm like, well, that doesn't mean that you're not depressed. Depression is a lot of things. Depression is fatigue. Depression is not wanting to eat, struggling with sleep, either going to sleep or falling asleep or waking up in the middle of the night. Depression can be a lot of different things, as well as anxiety. I know my anxiety way back when would show up in my stomach, and I'd have IBS and nausea. And it's important for everyone to know that a lot of high functioning professionals have functioning anxiety and depression. And what that means is, if it kind of goes back to that trauma response of chaos, right? If there's a lot of chaos going on, we know that we have to keep on going. So if I'm in a high profession as a counselor, as a doctor, I can't call in because my patients need me. So I have to keep going. I have to keep going. And so we ignore the fatigue. We ignore the stomach problems. We ignore the headaches. And really, that is what's our depression is coming out in that way.
So interesting about recognizing, and as Joanne said, we've talked about this on prior episodes about in a physician, in a high functioning, I like that you expanded to a high functioning profession. We're not giving ourselves permission to pay attention to what's going on with our mental or physical health and keep plowing through, even when we're our bodies or minds are trying to tell us to take a pause. So I wonder if a healthcare provider, if a physician is feeling out of alignment with themselves, and what's a belief that they need to kind of unlearn in order to feel free to get back into alignment with themselves again?
Yeah, that's another great question. Y'all are just giving all the good stuff. So I think the number one thing for a high functioning professional is awareness. Like, we have to recognize what's happening inside of us and with our relationships, either with our spouses, friends, significant others, children. When you notice that there's some strain somewhere, or let's say I'm feeling very tired more than normal, that is when we become aware and we have to say, okay, what I'm doing is not working because things aren't flowing well for me right now. And once you hit that awareness, then you're able to ask yourself, well, why is this happening? What's been going on? Do I not have support? Do I feel overwhelmed? Am I putting too much on my plate? Financially, are those stressors creeping in? Or my relationship stressors, are those creeping in? And kind of like evaluate ourselves, but looking at the external, because we are always like what's in front of us and we see everything else. But if we were to get out of our body and look down at us living, what is it that you see? And once we figure that out, then we can kind of move forward and be like, okay, well, this isn't working. And this is where you can go to your physician, you can go to your therapist, you can go to a coach, and you can ask, okay, well, I've noticed this. I don't like this. I'm not able to play with my kids. I've gained weight. I'm not eating healthy. My skin is not clear anymore. All of these are signs of depression and anxiety in your system. It's just a lot of us, I believe, kind of internalize, right? And then it comes out through our bodies instead of your normal, I'm crying, I'm sad, I want to not be on this planet anymore. It looks different in so many different individuals.
I think we should change the title of the name of our podcast to awareness, because we talk so much about the awareness, and that has to always be the point where we start, and right. And we can't improve what we can't measure or what we're not aware of or have clarity for. So thank you for bringing that up. And before I ask you the next question, what would you recommend be like a reframe, like I talk about the beliefs that we can think of when we're feeling calm, like we're meditating on a Sunday morning with our coffee or journaling. And then I also think of what are I call them my back pocket thoughts, like in case of emergency, when we're not feeling well, which is often when the trigger, when we recognize that we're not feeling well. What would be a reframe that you would recommend?
I usually tell myself to stop. And then from there, I bring in what is real and what is evidence, because with belief systems and old belief systems, they're just belief systems. And so we don't focus on what's in front of us and the evidence. And the evidence is I am not a depressed person. I am a leader. I do have energy. I just need to move my body. So kind of reminding myself the opposite of what I'm telling myself. So if I'm telling myself, oh no, Jeanette, you need to take a rest today because you're tired. Well, I might be tired, right? And it's okay to rest. And reminding myself, Jeanette, it is okay to rest. So maybe you can sleep an extra hour and then get to work. But also, I guess what I'm trying to say is to give yourself the permission to let yourself rest, but also remind yourself that I am not depressed right now. And yes, I'm going to rest and I'm going to be okay with that. But tomorrow I'm going to do X, Y, and Z.
Yes. And that's a good distinction of recognizing when, of course, without minimizing if ever someone is fully depressed, of course, that's a very different conversation and a very different attention that we need to put in. But when we're more on that kind of that sense of overwhelm or putting ourselves down, and we're experts at beating ourselves up and all the shoulds and all the negative talk. And I love always that pause to connect with the fact without necessarily minimizing the struggle, but reminding myself what's true. I love that. Thank you for saying that out loud. And in that, it's a great transition for one of our favorite questions, as in reference to the name of our podcast, in creating more meaning and rewriting the rules. Tell us, how are you creating more meaning in your life? How are you rewriting the rules? Whatever resonates with you more.
Yeah. So I think I'm rewriting the rules in multiple ways, but I guess more so, I'm rewriting the rules within myself, because we are born believing one thing and doing one thing, and that identity was no longer serving me. And so when I recognized and called awareness to my identity that was not working for me anymore, that was the moment when I said, I'm going to rewrite who I am as not only a therapist, but as a friend, as a daughter, as a potential partner one day, whenever I find the dream man that's waiting for me. But rewriting who I am today has been my biggest, what's the word I'm looking for? Masterpiece. Rewriting who I am today is my biggest masterpiece, because one thing I told a client the other day was life is a lot like puzzle pieces. And we have this puzzle, we have a desire to buy this puzzle, and we get the puzzle, and it's 1,000 pieces. And they're all like super itty bitty tiny pieces. And so you're like, okay, I'm ready to look at the puzzle. You open the puzzle and they're all mixed up and turned upside down. And in that moment, you have to decide, am I going to give up on this puzzle and just do what I was doing without opening it because that was so much easier? Or am I going to try to work on this puzzle and flip all the pieces over and then start seeing where they go and start seeing where they are? And then at the end, you have this new, beautiful masterpiece that you worked so hard on. So right now, I'm in the stage of constructing my masterpiece. And I hit that wall and I said, I don't want to feel tired all the time. I want to have energy to play with my 6-year-old child. I want to have energy to go to lunch with my friends. And so in that moment, I decided to rewrite the rules for myself. And that's what I teach clients and everybody, that you have the ability to say, okay, what I know is not working anymore, and I want to do it a different way.
I love that visual of the puzzle and the choice, because as coaches, Joanne and I talk about the choice you have in how you do the puzzle, how it's going to look. Are you going to continue? I love that. So empowering, and love that visual with the puzzle. So I just want to summarize some of the great concepts you've shared with us today, Jeanette. One is that we can lose ourselves in. Well, actually, let's go back to the beginning. You shared, first of all, that patients can be coached by their therapist to be able to address issues with their healthcare providers, and that can help improve the process of communication either through the patient or by initiating a release in order to get greater outcomes for that patient. And collaboration is so key in integrating that mental and physical health. You also shared ideas about how we can get lost in our profession or in our roles, and to be very keen on what is my identity, how is it serving me, and then ways to shift that as well. You shared some of the warning signs about burnout, and that as high-functioning professionals in medicine or other areas, we may not show up looking like the typical DSM diagnostics because we're still showing up to work. We may not look like we're sad and crying, but it may be those other cues that are going on, the fatigue, the sleep issues, etc. And let's not forget to pay attention to those. and ignore them too long until it gets to full-fledged burnout or severe mental health issues. You talked about raising our awareness about what's going on with us, whether it's bodily cues, how we're feeling, and asking ourselves, why is this happening? And who do I need to seek out? A therapist, a coach, a mentor, someone for support. I love that, not having to do it alone. Joanne and I consistently talk about the importance of our community, friends, support, paid support, so important. And then you also shared information about rewriting the rules, and that it's never too late to rewrite our identity, and getting really clear first, I think, about what do I want my new identity to be? I don't want to be tired all the time. And then taking those choices on how can we continue to create what you want out of your life and create your masterpiece. So beautifully said. With that, I wonder, what's one more piece of information that you think would be really helpful for our listener to know?
I would say, don't be afraid to ask for help. I find a lot of therapists, since I work with so many, who feel like they have to have it all together. They have to know everything and they can't ask for help. It's in that moment that we don't ask for help, we're doing not only ourselves a disservice, because we can always learn something new, but we're also doing our patients a disservice, because there's probably a different perspective that you weren't even aware of if you had just picked up the phone and said, "Hey, Jeanette, I have a question. And I can say, how can I help you?" Like, it's that consultation. And I know that it's always told to us, consult, but not only consult within our own professions, like the counselors don't have to just consult within themselves. I have tons of friends that are psychiatrists, primary care, and I will call them up and say, "Hey, I have a question about this. Can you tell me more about an SSRI? Or are there different SSRIs that work with these kinds of patients? Or my patient doesn't work well with Prozac. Is there something else that can help?" Or even with the primary care, "Hey, does this blood work look off?" Because I do request their blood work. I don't know how to read it, but that's why I have friends that are doctors. But I think it's important for us to reach out to each other. Like you said, we need community. We need each other to grow, not only in ourselves and in our profession, but to help our community grow.
This is so good. Thank you so much, Jeanette, for being here with us. And I love the universality of some of the things that we talk about. I know that, Erin and I, both physicians, we talk a lot about our experience, but it's always, heartwarming and heartbreaking to hear other professions, and as women, and, age, all the things that we share, and the struggles, but then also the hope of all the things that we can do and reach out, and in the community that Erin and I talk so much about. So thank you so much for being our guest for this episode.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It was so nice to talk to y'all.
Jeanette, you shared so much information